Buenos nachos, amigos, and welcome to another fantastic episode of the Record Breakers Music Podcast Extravaganza. I'm Peter Ray of Your Man with No Plan. Here with me, of course, is my team, my squad, the crew you know and love. We've got Patrick.
Hello.
We've got Brett.
Hey, leave me alone.
And we've got Drew.
Hey.
We're here, gathered, to talk about music, as we do almost every week. Pretty much every week. I mean,
almost.
Yeah, we try. We try.
Look, it's been a busy summer, guys.
God dang it.
Like, shit happened. I don't know if you heard. I was busy for a while.
Yes. But of course, to talk about music once again, we're gathered. The provider of said music is none other than Drew. Drew, what do you got for us this week?
This band is a band that I think is pretty widely known. They have a song that's sort of embedded into the American pop culture lexicon, but we're not going to go over the album that had that one. We're going to go over the one that actually was right directly before their live album that was their big, huge blow-up success. Their one that was a little lesser success, but was widely considered probably their best. And that's Heaven and Night by Rockford, Illinois' Cheap Trick.
Brett, what were your expectations coming into this album?
Well, I never really got into Cheap Trick. I know the hits. They never really stuck with me. I think a lot of that has to do with radio oversaturation, but yeah, it's sort of on par with like if you're from Indiana and you hear a John Mellencamp song come on, you can't get to that radio dial quick enough because you've just heard it too much. And when I grew up, I was a subscriber of Guitar World, so I saw plenty of ads with a certain guitarist with a guitar that was checkerboard and had like 18 necks on it and stuff. So I'm somewhat familiar, but no, I've never really dove in.
Patrick, what were your expectations coming into this album?
I know the hits. I saw them live once because they opened for Aerosmith when I was in high school, and I was really into Aerosmith in high school. I know I'm a horrible person.
Yep.
Knocking it, no excuses. I like some Cheap Trick songs, but I've never really listened to a record, which I think is a thing that happens on this show sometimes. So I was at least, I knew I was going to get at least one song I liked, and probably several others. We'll go into that in more detail.
Yeah. Drew, how would you describe this album musically?
Well, Cheap Trick in general, and especially like this album, musically, is something that I think is really kind of just cool for the era. It's really something kind of special. The band brought sort of that power pop sound into a lot more households, I think, around the world. It was a sound that was sort of happening in this sort of late 70s era, but their popularity really sort of pushed it forward, in my opinion. Like I said, Budokan was much better selling overall commercially, but critically this is one of their best received records, and because it's so tightly done. They took a approach in this record that if you listen to their first record, it was way darker than anything that anyone would consider the hits. And then the next record was way lighter and like way more poppy than anything that came after it. This is sort of them saying, okay, we like both of those, but like that's not what we want to do going forward. Like, let's find a happy middle ground here, right? And that's what they sort of have with this record. It solidified what would become the Cheap Trick sound and what made them famous, especially the first track off of this one, which we will get into. I personally, for something like Cheap Trick, I love them because in an era of music and a style of music that's very guitar driven, the bass in this record and their records in general are just very well done. It's not overly done, but it's nice and it's thick and it has this really good tone to it. And that comes from them creating this 12-string bass, which is a 4x3 where you have the regular 4 strings and they're doubled up with the higher octave of each string, and it creates this much fuller sound. If you're familiar with a 12-string guitar, it's a similar sort of thing. And we can go into the minutia of why that works and why that's cool and how they sort of spawned the shot up, and it was sort of designed by a guy for them. And then they're now, I was looking up right before we hit record to sort of see if they're still like commercially available, which they actually are. It's just a band in general, and very much this album, in my opinion, is probably their best, and the one that, if I'm going to choose an album that's not like a greatest hits from Cheap Trick, it's going to be Heaven Tonight, just because from front to back, it's just a very complete record that makes me happy. From the band in general, from everything they've done as far as like catchy hooks and stuff like that, it's just a fun band.
Yeah.
There's not much more to say about them than that.
They're also well known for being 50% attractive.
This is true.
Yes.
As demonstrated on the album cover.
Yes.
And that's the thing. Yeah,
that's the album cover, and then if you look at the back, it's revealed that they're in a public bathroom, and like friggin' Rick Nielsen is brushing his teeth, and like the other dude is like fixing it, like just there hanging out. You know?
Yeah, no, and it very much, the band in general, their antics, I think, are part of what appeals to me as well, from Cheap Trick, because you get those two guys that if you're watching the YouTube video, you get the two guys that are on the cover that's in the middle of us right now, right? And they're very much what you...
commercially appealing.
Right. You'd expect them to be like in the backing band for Frampton Comes Alive or some shit, right? Like they're very good looking, like 70s rockers, and then like
feathered hair.
Yeah, you get the rest of the bands.
Those other two bastards.
Yeah. Bunch of nerds.
Yes.
So,
Brett, what would be the themes elements that catch your attention on this album?
Well, like Drew was saying, this is a 70s rock act. So if you think of like the contemporaries at this time, rock and roll was not doing really good at this time in history. You had some guys that put on face paint and caused a ruckus, and you had some arena rock going on. But this was the era where pop music and disco was king, and like really, you know, the 70s rock scene was very strange. This is a very strange thing to be in the public conversation in my mind, because this is very not what was, you know, produced. This is not a very sellable album by just. I mean, it has a few songs that are catchy for radio play, but there are some songs on here that would never hit the wheels of steel ever. There are some radio unfriendly tracks going on in this album, so you got that. It's not a super guitar heavy album. There's not. I mean, it's got guitar. It does what guitars do, but it's not like a tour de force. There's not crazy licks, and you know, there's some blues licks thrown in for expression, but there's other stuff that gets the attention. Boy, howdy, do I want to get into some of those. Yeah. There's also, like you was, there's a freaking mandocello in this album. I can't not talk about a song that has a harpsichord, some strings, a mandocello, and you know, also everything sounded like the technology was about 2 years from being good enough to sound good. Like there were some effects put on, like the guitar, that were like, wow, they improved how those things sound these days, which was cool because it meant that somebody had a box that was the size of a Buick that they were stepping on.
Yes.
But yeah, you know, you get kudos for trying when it wasn't easy.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of things that they're going on in this album, but like the main thing, this was in the era of Kiss.
Yep.
And you know, the most like spoon feed you rock and roll music. This doesn't have to be anything cool. We're going to talk about rock and rolling, and the amount of time we're going to do it. There's a little bit more than that in this.
Yeah, that is for sure. Patrick, what would be the theme songs that caught your attention?
It's what we would call now classic rock. Like Brett said, the height of rock and roll previous to this was sort of the late 60s and early 70s. Most of that had run out of steam. Zeppelin were on their last 2 or 3 crazy records. The Who had really slowed down. And rock was not in a great place. Cheap Trick are a band that I would best describe as their highs are very high. Like, they have some great all-time songs, but there's a lot of filler on this record. There's a lot of... It's okay, and I'm not going to turn it off, but it's, you know, it's just sort of generic late 70s poppy rock and roll music. It's not bad. They play the music reasonably well, but it doesn't have... like the bands I mentioned at the top, like the stuff that came before, like Zeppelin or The Who, they were all full of crazy, crazy musicians. Cheap Trick is full of adequate musicians, and that's sort of like you don't get like that... You know, what crazy thing are they going to do, or how like perfect are they going to play this? It's rock and roll. It was probably fun to go see in 1978, and it probably, if you were someone still trying to hang on to rock and roll, it was probably a nice thing to hear on the radio. But it's from not the greatest years of rock and roll music. So it's
those Van Halen kids hadn't shown up yet.
Yeah, like it's sort of in that in between before like Van Halen and hair metal and Jump Splits hit, which is a mixed bag in itself. But after like the crazy early 70s, you know, some of the greatest bands ever existed.
Let's not. Van Halen had hair, but let's not put them in the same sentences.
They
had Jump Splits.
They had Jump Splits, glam metal. Maybe we'll go with glam rock.
There was Guyliner on at least one video.
Yeah, but I would not put. Here's the thing: I would not put a band like Van Halen in the same room as, say, Stryper. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I don't think Stryper would want to be in the room with Van Halen.
That would be. I think
they would find David Lee Roth's existence offensive.
But okay, hair band adjacent, at least on the radio dial.
Yeah, yes, on the radio dial.
There were stylistic similarities. The difference is Van Halen was full of crazy good musicians, and most of the other hair bands were full of adequate musicians.
I could make the argument that Van Halen was filled with a good musician and a showman.
Yeah.
And then Jimmy Hagar when the showman.
And the music is structurally
and Michael
different.
Anthony is a bass player who could keep up with Eddie. They were all good. Listen to the opening drums of Hot for Teacher and tell me Alex Van Halen isn't an amazing drummer. Just listen to that. I still have no idea what he's been doing. I've been listening to that song for like 20 years.
Twista, a great rapper.
Wow.
Well, let's record scratched. We're getting back on track right now. Okay, Petey.
That's the reference that I'm the only one that I get it, and you just threw some massive shade, and nobody saw it but me. Yeah. Like nobody got it.
And I on fundamental like Van Halen, but I'm just counterpointing the argument.
Fucking just wrecked him in a way. Oh my god. Fucking, oh my god.
Yeah, as you were talking about this album before we got derailed, Patrick.
Yeah, so like I said, it's got one of the greatest songs of its era and some other songs on it, some of which are better than others. That would sort of be my overall take.
The crux of it. Yeah, I can see that. I definitely enjoyed it more than that, but yeah, I could see that. Drew, what would be some of the key tracks to zero in on?
Well, I'm not going to go with the obvious one first, like last week. I'm going to go my list of bottom up. Heaven and Night was great to me because in an album that I find filled with a lot of like very happy hooks and very like cheery, fun melodies. This track was very like sort of dark. It had this sort of psychedelic feel. I will save Brett to sort of get into the instrumentation of it all, and what sort of made it weird, because I'm sure he'll have something to say about it. But just the composition, that sort of psychedelic feel in a very almost scary track because of what it's dealing with, the potential ends of drug use, the potential ends of the excesses you were seeing in this era, I think was really, really cool. California Man, I'm going to pick out the cover just because, as a guy who tends to listen to the ELO side of the guys that made this song as opposed to this band, I tend to like, surprise, I tend to like the Cheap Trick version better than the band I don't really care for. I dig the more grittier take on it. The sort of, like Brett said, the overdrive before like the tech was all there yet sound to it. I thought it was cool. But it was still a good homage to the band, as I believe it's made known that Cheap Trick have sort of liked the move in ELO and all that sort of stuff. And then, of course, you can't talk about this record without talking about Surrender. Surrender is an anthem, and personally, I believe Surrender is a rock anthem for a reason. It's their second most well-known song. I think I'm not going too far out on a limb to say that. The second most, everybody knows the first most, let's be fair. And it's sort of this song that is a cool affirmation. It's something that you can feel okay, you can feel good at the end of. And I think that was sort of their goal. It's sort of that the parents that were growing up at that time and raising children at that time were something that they grew up in a weird time, and because they grew up in a weird time, they were raising their kids with a different outlook than was done before. But it was that essence of, yeah, no, shit's a little weird right now. It's gonna be cool. Like, it's gonna be cool. We're all going through it. It's weird. Like, it's all right. And like, I think that's sort of cool. They've done interviews, and as I was researching for like sort of getting my thoughts together and listening to the record and like looking at what they've said about each song that I wanted to pick out, they sort of bring up the fact that they originally wrote it for them, like as a affirmation that each one of them, like, they knew the situations they grew up in, and they wrote it for them so that when they said we're all right, they meant themselves. But after hearing it, like at Budokan, being chanted at you by tens of thousands of people, it sort of reminds the band that, yeah, they wrote it for themselves, they wrote it about themselves, but it could be about more, and it could be about more people, and that's sort of why why that's an anthem for a lot of people, and why it just sort of sticks around.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to make a joke around bottoms up. So I double researched it. I didn't end up making a joke, but I did notice that it's an album by the band, by jazz group The Three Sounds, and a song by Trey Songz. And also bring it back around. Also track 4 on Van Halen's Van Halen 2. But yeah. These are the things that you see me researching on Wikipedia over here while everyone else is talking. You're wondering why I'm looking over here. It's usually I'm on Wikipedia.
Never stop.
It's amazing.
Never stops. Never stop. Never stopping. I gotta see that movie. Brett, what will be some of the key tracks for you to zero in on?
Well, I guess we should do. Let's start where Drew ended. Surrender. This is a Paul Mute power chord rock song that's poppy as all get out. It's probably, well, it's the most successful track on this album. I'm not going to compare it to Dream Police, but or that other song that will not be named. But it's a pretty memorable song. But it really does leverage on its simplicity and a catchy hook. It is you could take a master class in how you don't have to have the most song, you just have to have the catchiest of song, and the efficiency in that is really great. Um, and then we'll get into the weird. Alf Wiedersen. That's another palm mute rock track that this time sounded like Alice Cooper. Um,
It's the other song about death on this record, other than Heaven Tonight. Just super weird.
It is a very, very strange song that is for as jaunty and as sing-songy as it is, or tale-telly, something-y as it is. But the real meat that I can dig into is Heaven Tonight. So, like, at first, I didn't know if these were actually real instruments or like prototypical, like the genesis of fake harpsichord and strings. But no, they were just, that's the way they sound. And then there is the mandocello, which is also an instrument that has strings that sit side to side. And I enjoy a mandocello from time to time. It's good on a hot summer day. But no, the lyrics are nutty. This is a song that doesn't really fit well with the sound of the rest of the album. Like I give them the tip of the hat for putting something as complicated and weird, and knowing fully that no radio station is ever going to play that, and they're probably going to get flack from the studio for trying to sneak something like this in. Because for a band at this point in their career who were big in Japan, being able to do what you want in your albums when people have money on the line can be difficult. So I give them the tip of the hat for bringing the weird. The weird is always a fun thing. I didn't hear a sproing, but there was some closeness. There was some sproing adjacent. Sounds coming out. So I Heaven Tonight. It's a real humdinger.
The humdinger. It was really cool because I'm hearing, according to Wikipedia, it cites an interview said that Nielsen described the song as a kind of a parody of some of the drug songs in the 60s, and that it could even be the basis for a movie.
I've found my calling in life.
Yes.
I'm a director.
Yes. It's a nice little thing. Patrick, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
Before getting into the obvious, Auf Wiedersehen, I'll touch on. That song had some fucking fantastic vocals. Like, everything else about the song was fine. Vocals were really good. It was a deeply fucked up song, but, any song about suicide is going to be pretty fucked up. And then Surrender, which I think is, like I said, one of the greatest songs of its era, a great vocal hook with really, really well-chosen harmonies. This is like that sort of power pop rock. Like, this is the prototype. This is where that sound comes from. It all comes back to very much Surrender and some of Cheap Trick's other jaunty hits. It's a simple song, but it's aged, I think, really well. And I understand, like, yeah, it got the crap played out of it on the radio. And if you're the sort of person who has been listening to classic rock radio for the last 15 years, you're sick of it. But if you quit listening to classic rock radio a decade ago, it was kind of nice to come back to Surrender. That's a fun song.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a lot of fun songs, and a lot of there's quite a few songs that you can kind of like dig your teeth in and get cool with. Yeah, and this overall is just, I think it's a really cool record, a really fun record. Let's bring it back around the horn. Talk about some conclusive thoughts. Brett, what would be your conclusive thoughts on this album?
Well, this album didn't really change my overall feelings of Cheap Trick. I'm not going to call this a dumpster fire. There's musicianship and somebody crafted some music here. Just because it didn't get its hooks into me doesn't mean it's not good. It's obviously critically acclaimed for what that's worth. I guess I'm a critic too. Suck it. But you know, it was music of this era is really hard because I wasn't there when it happened, and I find that if you had to be there when it happened for you to enjoy it. But there are people that enjoy this that weren't there, so I can't. You know, it's very much of its time, and I sort of loathe that time unless we're flying spaceships called the Rosinante into a black hole and writing 12-minute songs about it. But you know, this is a very tumultuous time for rock music, and I'm kind of happy that somebody made it through as efficiently as Cheap Trick by way of Japan.
Yes.
I do love the thought of being big in Japan.
Patrick, what would be your conclusive thoughts on this album?
Go listen to Cheap Trick Greatest Hits. Just pick one of those. You're gonna find more good stuff, and you'll get if you're unfamiliar with Cheap Trick, I think that's a better place to start. Just because you'll get all the other songs some alluded to and some called out by name. This isn't bad. It's just it doesn't do anything for me outside of a couple of songs. I think it's okay, but again, like if you really just want to know what Cheap Trick means, like if you're a person who's never been into them, just go find whatever greatest hits album of theirs is streaming somewhere and listen to that, and you'll have, I think, a better experience.
You'll get all 3 Cheap Trick songs.
Yes, you'll get all three.
There's 4.
Oh, sorry. We'll have to debate that later. I don't want to be reductive.
Yeah.
The Flame charted. Not well, but it charted.
Yes.
It was a thing for a second.
Fair enough. Drew, what would be your conclusive thoughts on this album?
The reason I brought something like Cheap Trick, if I'm going to bring something from this era of music, is because, yeah, they're not the most complex. I think there's a lot there from, like, a catchy composition standpoint. I like my music to be overly catchy at times, and I feel like Cheap Trick very much delivers that in spades a lot of times, especially with songs like Surrender, Dream Police, the one we keep not naming, I Want You to Want Me. And if that's the only song you've heard of theirs, is I Want You to Want Me, the one we keep not wanting to mention because it's one of the most overplayed things on the planet, I would implore you to listen to more than just that. I think that Cheap Trick in general, while, yeah, they're not a bunch of Canucks playing space music. They're not crazy jazz from New York. No, they're not going to be that. But there's something more there, I think, than I Want You to Want Me. There's more thought put into it than a lot of people give them credit for. And I sort of, I can hold with it, Bub.
Yes.
I think that Heaven Tonight is, I believe, critically acclaimed for a reason. I think the band was ranked. It has been ranked highly on many a list of all-time rock bands. They've never been a top 10. Let's be fair, but as you're sort of nudging into the new wave punk rock era of that late 70s, early to mid 80s thing, you had things in plain old rock and roll that still came out and was still fun. And to me, that's what Cheap Trick is something that's just fun. It's just popcorn music. It's something that you can sort of put on in the background, like doing something, and just have a good time and smile afterwards. And then you get something like Your Heavens Tonight and Your Vida Sons that's a little bit weird, but hey, if Japan wants them to be the American Beatles, then by golly, I think that's all right.
That's all right by me. Yes. So yeah, those are our thoughts on Cheap Trick's Heaven Tonight. Now we got to the main event of the evening. We get to our haiku reviews. We get to summing it all up into these little poetic Johnson rejoinders. So go on this journey with us. Eh? Haikus. All right. Brett, what is your haiku?
Artfully written, 70s pop rock music. Spirit wasn't moved.
Patrick, what is your haiku?
Classic rock and roll, one legendary hit song. Otherwise, it's fine.
Mine is, it is no cheap trick that these guys can rock good tunes that are fun to jam. And Drew, what is your haiku?
A band that's classic, completely their own thing. Refrigerator. Every once in a while, I gotta break it out just because it makes me laugh.
Yes. And of course, that sums it all up for our thoughts on Cheap Trick's Heaven Tonight. You can, of course, find it on our Spotify playlist. Listen to Play Record Breakers, the home game. Next week, we might have a guest, and therefore their album would be on the Spotify playlist. We don't have one booked right now as of this recording, but you'll find out with us as it happens. But my next album, so I can give you guys something to listen to, is not on Spotify, unfortunately. It's not on a couple places. You're gonna have to go find it. You can find it on vinyl. This is the website that we've probably mentioned it before. It's BAINIL, vinyl. Because yes, it is in fact. If you remember why I would bring that website up from a while back, it is some Korean indie. It is going to be the Cox, their recent album, The New Normal. So listen to that. Go check that out. Do your homework. Come back to us either next or the following week for that. But keep an eye out for that. But that's it for us. You can, of course, find us all over the internet. Patrick is at Swagger. Brett is at Hibbity-Bibbert, HIBBI2YBIBBARD. Drew is at XLuciferX. I'm at PD Rave. The show is 4 Record Breakers. That's the number 4 Record Breakers. RecordBreakersPodcast.com. RecordBreakersPodcast@gmail.com is our email. Send us email. Rebelli.net for listening to other shows. Rebelli TV on YouTube, on Twitch, on all the things. We're on iTunes, Stitcher, all the places where you can get podcasts. Subscribe, like, share, do the things. Until next time, hasta los huevos.
Toodaloo.